My name is Robert Salas. Contrary to what it says on the card, I was not a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. I was in the Air Force active duty after I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1964 until 1971 and separated as a captain. In March of 1967, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, as a missile launch officer, Minuteman missiles. On an early morning of March 16th, 1967, I got a call from my security guard, primary security guard upstairs. We had about 6, as I recall, flight security airmen upstairs. I was downstairs 60 feet underground in a capsule monitoring and controlling 10 nuclear-tipped Minuteman missiles. I got a call that morning that they were seeing strange lights flying in the sky. I disregarded that call. Told them to call me when something more significant happened. I got another call subsequent to that call, and this time it was a more intense tone in the guard's voice. It was very clearly very frightened. He said there was a bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. He had all the other guards out there with their weapons drawn. Right after that call, I woke up my commander, who was on a rest period, Fred Mywald, a retired colonel now, and told him about the phone calls. As I was telling him about the phone calls, my weapons started going down, one after the other. They went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable. We lost somewhere between 6 and 8 weapons that morning within minutes of having received that second phone call of a UFO hovering outside the front gate. Again, that morning, after reporting it to the command post, we were informed that a very similar incident happened at Echo Flight. I was at Oscar Flight. They lost all 10 of their weapons under similar circumstances, very similar circumstances, where UFOs were sighted over the launch facilities. They had maintenance crews and security crews out there that had spent the night, and they were reporting UFOs over those sites. And the commander of that flight was Eric Carlson. He also separated as a captain, and the deputy commander was Walt Fiegel, retired as a lieutenant colonel. We have those witnesses that I just mentioned, the names I just mentioned have spoken of this event before, and they will back up this story. We also have documentation that I received through FOA requests from the Air Force outlining the Echo Flight incident and including in that documentation a reference to UFOs. We have telexes covering this incident, and in one telex it says the fact that no apparent reason for the loss of 10 missiles can be readily identified is cause for grave concern to this headquarters. This was from SAC headquarters. So we've got those telexes. I've got about 12 witnesses that'll verify parts of this story, including of a man who investigated the incident afterwards for the Air Force, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from the next witness. And also another guard that witnessed a UFO in that same time period, and another officer who retired a full colonel who had other reports of UFOs. Ancillary to that, excuse me, I've got the complete report on a Minot, North Dakota incident. That was Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, which happened in August of 1966. Very similar UFOs sighted over missile silos, and also a UFO incident that was investigated by the Air Force immediately after our incident within a week. I'm willing to testify to the truth of all these matters that I've spoken about this in front of Congress under oath. The event, the incident, I guess I call it, happened on the morning of March 16th, 1967. I was on duty along with my commander, Fred Mywald. We were both on duty at Oscar Flight. As part of the 490th Strategic Missile Squadron. There are 5 launch control facilities assigned to that particular squadron. Kilo Lima Mike November Oscar. Okay, here's Echo. Echo Launch Control Facility is located some 30 miles north of Lewiston. Oscar was another 30 or 40 miles east of Lewiston. November just south of Lewiston. We were at Oscar Flight. It was still dark out. Of course, we're 60 feet underground, and there's no way we can see out. But as I recall, it was early in the morning, and I received a call from my topside security guard, who's the flight security controller. I think we call him FSC. And he said that he and some of the guards had been observing some strange lights flying around the site, around the launch control facility. And he said they were acting very unusual, just flying around. And I said, well, you mean UFO? I think I used that word. You mean like UFOs? And he said, well, he said he didn't know what they were, but they were lights. They were flying around, and they weren't airplanes. They weren't making any noise. They were not helicopters, and they were making some very strange maneuvers, and he couldn't explain them. Well, I told him, I just kind of shook my head and just said, well, call me if anything more important than that happens, basically, and we just ended the conversation. It wasn't more than, within a few minutes, I'd say, maybe a half hour later. He calls back, and this time he's very frightened. I can tell by the tone of his voice, he's very shook up, and said, sir, there's a glowing red object hovering right outside the front gate. And I'll show you where the gate might be located. But where he's located, he's got a large picture window of the front gate. And he said, I'm looking at it right now. It's a glowing red object. I've got all the men out here with their weapons drawn. And of course, he was all shook up while he was telling me this. He was very excited. I didn't know what to make of it, but he wanted me to give him instructions or orders, tell him what to do. And I think I said something like, make sure the perimeter fence is secure. And then he said right away, he said, I've got to go, sir. One of the guards has become injured. He hung up. I immediately went over to my commander, who was taking a nap. We have a little cot down there in a rest period. And I was telling him about the telephone call we just received. And as I was relating this to him, our missiles started shutting down one by one. By shutting down, I meant they went into a no-go condition. No-go condition, meaning they could not be launched. So we get bells and whistles, we get a red light, no-go condition, and as I recall it at the time, it seemed like every one of them shut down. But later, in recalling this incident with my commander Mywald, he said he thought we only lost about maybe 7 or 8 of these weapons went down into a no-go condition. These weapons are Minuteman I missiles. These were, of course, nuclear tip, nuclear warhead missiles. The weapons here. So they started shutting down, and immediately he gets up, and we both start querying the status board. We've got the ability to query and determine what the cause of the shutdowns were. As I recall, most of them were guidance and control system failures. And then he started reporting to the command post. And in the meantime, I called upstairs to find out what the status was of this object. The guard said, well, the object has left. It just left at high speed. I asked him what the object looked like, and all he could say, there was a general oval shape, but it was glowing red. It was glowing a reddish orange around the object, and it was generally oval shaped. But he said it was very hard to distinguish any features of it. So that's
how far away and what altitude was it?
Well, he said it was hovering right over the fence, and to me, it's that would have been within about 30 feet away from him. The fence was maybe 8 feet high. There is another incident that happened just within a week of this, week after, where there were radar reports and quite a few more witnesses. The Air Force did an extensive investigation of the entire incident and was not able to come up with a probable cause for the shutdowns. And I've got quite a few witnesses that'll testify to that. We've got a couple of people who worked on the investigative team, and I've got correspondence from the fellow that actually organized the investigative team, and there was no viable explanation for this. Each missile is basically self-supporting. The commercial, most of them are powered by commercial power, but each missile has its own power generator. The only connection between the capsule and the missile sites themselves is what we call SIN lines, or their Sensitive Information Network, SIN lines, that are basically buried cables. But inside the capsule itself, and these lines go to the missiles directly. The missiles are not connected to each other. So having a fault at one site would not affect missiles at another location.
And how many total went down?
Well, at our site, there were approximately anywhere from 6 to 8 that went down, but they went down in rapid succession, which again is an extremely rare happening. We rarely had more than one missile go down for any reason at all, and this was very rare. There was weather was ruled out. Like I said, an extensive investigation was done. Weather was ruled out. Power surges were ruled out. There was only one possibility that was looked at by one of the Boeing engineers that did some tests in a laboratory, and he thought that some kind of an electromagnetic force or field might have caused a signal to go, but it would have had to have gone through these buried cable to each of these missiles. After I talked to my guard upstairs, got the information about the other guard that had been injured, my commander was talking to the command post. And he finished talking to the command post, and he turned to me, my commander, and said, the same thing occurred at Echo Flight. Echo Flight is another squadron about, I'd say, 50, 60 miles away from our location. But they had the same sort of thing happen. They had UFOs that were hovering not the launch control facility, but the actual launch facilities where the missiles are actually located. They had some maintenance and security people out there at the time, and they were observed. The UFOs were observed by these people out at those sites. Now, they lost all 10 of their weapons, all 10.
Is this around the same time?
It was the same morning. So that morning, we lost anywhere from, 16 to 18 ICBMs. At the same time, UFOs were in the area and were observed by airmen. Topside guard observed UFOs. At the time, we lost our missile systems. It also talks about the security team that I had sent out to check the security infractions. And while en route back, they lost radio contact. And one of these men, again, I said, was very upset about this whole incident and was unable to return. He says, I heard secondhand that one was released from security team duties. Those missiles were down the entire day because we've got testimony from Colonel Don Crawford, who relieved the crew at Echo Flight, and he was there while the missiles were being brought up to alert status. He said it took the whole day. So I'm assuming it took our missiles the whole day to be brought back up also. So we got relieved. I went upstairs. First thing I did was look in the guard's eye and say, hey, will you tell me the truth about this object? And he swore up and down he was telling the truth. I believed him, for a couple of reasons. I knew he was frightened when he called me down there, and then when I looked him in the eye and he told me about the situation, I certainly believed him. And again, I wrote up a report on this incident. It was in my log, and I turned it over. When we got to the base, we had to report to our squadron commander right away. And in that room with my squadron commander was a fellow from AFOSI. We had a AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigation, on the base. He was there in the office with the commander. They asked for my logs. He wanted a quick briefing, although it seemed to me he knew pretty much what had happened already. But we gave him a quick briefing, and then he asked us both to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying this was classified information. We were not to release this to anybody. And that was it. And we couldn't talk. He told us we could not talk about this to anyone, including any of the other crews, our spouses, our family, even amongst each other. So we could not discuss this at all. Some weeks before my incident, he received a report from an airman on duty saying something was outside the perimeter fence he'd never seen before. The object was lighted and seemed to be watching the site. It approached and retreated, and something circled the site. He had this conversation. He told the man, the guard, to go ahead and use his weapon, but the guard said he didn't think it would do any good. He tried to report it to the command post, and the command post didn't want to receive the report. That was the end of that. I was there at Malmstrom for another 2 years after that, and in that time, we were never given a debriefing on any of the incident. Either incident, either the Echo incident or our own, which is very unusual because we got briefed every morning on any anomalies that were going on with the equipment. We got briefed and we discussed these technical issues that were going on with the weapons and all that, but we never heard anything else about these incidents. And these were major happenings. They were major happenings. I've got a telegram, a copy of a telex, which we received under FOIA, coming from SAC headquarters to Malmstrom and other bases saying, right after the morning that this happened, saying that this incident was of extreme concern to SAC headquarters because they couldn't explain it. Nobody could explain what happened. But yet we never got debriefed, and we were cleared for very high classification because these are nuclear weapons we're dealing with. We had high clearances, and yet we were never debriefed on this at all. And you see here, there's a reference to a secret message on the same subject here. This is should be a copy, an exact duplicate. It should be an exact duplicate. But as you see here, under the subject, here there was a reference, but here it's missing. The only other thing I might mention is we did get security incursion alarms at those sites that went when the missile went down. So, which a little unusual. Well, that is unusual because normally when a missile went down for something like guidance failure, we wouldn't get security incursion alarms.
What does that mean, security? Means there's a perimeter breach?
It means there's a perimeter breach, that some object crossed the fence or something broke the security alarm system that we had on the perimeter of the launch facility. So I did send guards to a couple of those facilities to investigate that. Well, the only description I got of movement was, like I said, the first telephone call, where they had erratic movement of these lights flying around above the launch control facility. Other than that, the guard upstairs said that the object that was hovering took off at great speed. I mean, he just left rapidly, quickly. The reason I think this story is really significant is because going back to this August of 1966 at Minot Air Force Base, very similar thing happened at one of the launch control facilities at Minot Air Force Base. They had the same kind of weapon system we had, Minuteman I missiles. This was observed on radar. There was some communication failure. The object was observed over the launch control facility. So, and that happened in August 1966, and that's documented, well documented, that incident. About a week prior to my incident of March of '67, I've got a record of it from the crew commander. Got a call from one of his security guards who was out roaming, looking at the launch facilities, and saw an object very similar to what I just described over launch facility. He reported it in. The commander reported it to command post. Command post said they weren't interested in that report. They just didn't even want to take the report. And that happened about a week before ours happened. About a week to 10 days after our incident, there's a very well documented incident that happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base. And in this case, near Malmstrom Air Force Base, and again, this was another one that was tracked by radar. It was observed at close range, relatively close range, by a truck driver and highway patrolman. And there's extensive report on that. And the Air Force did an investigation, and there's an extensive report on the Air Force investigation of this sighting, this UFO sighting, because it flew around the base, near the base, and very, very close to the base. Like I said, it was seen by a truck driver and a highway patrolman. And this incident was reported back to headquarters. There's correspondence going back and forth, and I've got some of that. So this is a whole series of things that happened having to do with the same kind of weapon system, Minuteman missile. The reports that were made to me by my guards were official reports. These were not these were not jokes. They were not meant to be anything but official reports, because we were dealing with weapons, strategic weapons during the Cold War, during the Vietnam War. They were very professional, these guards, and they were not about to be joking about weapons being, when we had weapons down, about what they were seeing. So these were not rumors, they were official reports. So if they were recanted for any reason, these men should have been court-martialed for giving false reports or false information during a very sensitive incident. And none of that happened. None of that happened. These were not rumors. There's nothing about rumors. The primary witnesses that'll verify this incident are the Echo crew, the commander and deputy commander, and my own commander, Fred Mywald. Bob Kaminsky headed up the organization team that organized the investigative team to look at all aspects of these shutdowns. Kaminsky relates to me in writing, I've got it in writing, that at some point he was told by his boss that the Air Force had said, stop the investigation, do no more on this, and in addition, do not write a final report. Again, this is very unusual, especially in view of the fact that SAC headquarters was stating, and this is SINCSAC, was stating that this was of extreme importance to find out exactly what happened here. And yet, the head of the investigative team was told that a stop work order was on the way from OAMA. OAMA is the Air Materiel Command at Ogden, Utah, to stop any further effort on this project. We stopped. We were also told that we were not to submit the final engineering report and not write a final report. I heard that many of the guards that had reported these incidents were sent off to Vietnam, as a matter of fact. I know for a fact, this I can attest to, that one of the guards I sent out to one of the launch facilities, again, observed an object and came back and was too shook up, was very shaken by the experience, and was taken off guard duty from then on. He was sent somewhere else. He was just too shaken by the experience. And to this day, they have never forgotten it. It has been a life-altering experience for them.